All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode. And today I'm joined by Jonathan Bonanno, and he is the CEO of talentbyzia.com and also chiefpsycho.com. Those are like the two greatest names of websites I've ever heard. So congrats on that. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be with you, Dr. Block, and have some fun today.
Yeah, I want to get into all about your companies. Let's first hear how you even got involved with helping dental professionals.
Yeah, so late 2018, I was recruited out from the corporate world of healthcare and pharmaceuticals that I spent the last close to 7 years really building and forming my career. And I was much more in like the project management space. I was a project manager, a business analyst, an implementations manager, and did a lot of those various roles within McKesson, CVS Health, and some of these big pharma organizations. And I was recruited into dentistry actually by my husband. He had just recently sold his practices in Arizona, built out a DSO, and was ready to really launch it and really see it explode. But if you know Michael, Michael is a visionary person. So he needed somebody that was more interested in the people, the operations, the HR capacity. So I was recruited into dentistry from him, joined his agency, stepped in as a COO, inherited 65 plus employees that I had no idea what they were doing all day. But I just jumped right in and I was looking at what was the transferable knowledge from the medical and pharmaceutical side of healthcare that I could bring into dentistry. And the really clear lens that I was able to operate from was just continuous improvement. What is the opportunity that's present? Where are the gaps? Where are the holes? What's the conversation sound like? What is the synergy taking place amongst the team? So the more that I was in those discussions, the more I just dug deeper into the people side. I was so fixated on the project arena and the conversation prior to coming into dentistry that I need to shift my focus entirely too. It was no longer just about enrolling somebody inside of what should be accomplished. It was the encouragement, the motivation, getting to the core of the person to understand that, hey, this is the outcome and this is how we get there together. So that's a long-winded response of saying how I got into dentistry.
And what's your background, your training?
Yeah, so when I started inside of the corporate world, I was doing my graduate and my undergraduate degrees back to back. So I have a bachelor's in business administration, a master's in management with an emphasis in business. I'm a fourth year resident for my PhD in industrial organizational psychology. And then I have a handful of certifications. Just recently, I got certified in psychodynamic psychotherapy, which I'm really excited to start bringing into practice. And along with talent optimization consulting, I'm also certified in social science and behavioral research. And it's really great because I've been able to really pull everything together. And I look at it from the sense of being in the lab. So every time that I'm taking on new information, I'm looking at ways to apply it. And it's great because that's the point of experimenting, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like, what you're doing is everything I didn't learn in dental school, which was how to really deal with people, and all of a sudden we're the leader of a dental office. Even if you're an associate, make no mistake, you're a leader, but especially as an owner, you're a leader and you are in charge of employees and staff, and it still is difficult for me. um, I had a big gigantic case of imposter syndrome when I first got out of school. How do you combat imposter syndrome?
Yeah. It's funny because that's always been a challenge for myself. And I've always looked at it from the angle of confidence. And I wouldn't say that. I would say that I gained the level of clarity around where the confidence level and the trust factors within myself really started showing up in the last couple years and inside of how much energy I'm truly fueling into imposter syndrome. Because there's, of course, psychological awareness that takes place because we're in our own heads about our own abilities and our own skill set, right? But as I started working through that, I'm young, I'm 29, I'm going to be 30 this year. And oftentimes I've been the youngest in a lot of the conversations and the youngest in the room that I'm in. So it's it's been one of those things where, the seat at the table is either gifted or you're bringing it on your own. And many instances, I've taught myself to bring my own table or bring my own chair or do what I need to do in order to ensure that I'm creating value or providing something of substance in the conversation. So the moment that I started shifting that was reminding myself that I have value to bring. And it's not the fact that, I'm not this or that, or I don't have this many years of experience, or I don't have this much understanding or education, rather than looking at it from the angle of like, no, this is what I have and what I'm bringing to the table. And this is really awesome and magical. And now I can partner with somebody else that can help fill the void. So I started looking at it from the power of energy. So, how much energy are you fueling the lack of imposter or feeling of an imposter that you have? And how much more emphasis are you placing there? When you start pulling that back and repositioning it into another area, like, oh, wow, I am really skilled in diagnosing X. Okay, great. I'm going to really lean into that. And then now we have a different feeling, we have a different attachment, a different experience of it. And I think that's where the imposter syndrome really sits with us, right? Because as business owners, as entrepreneurs, that we're going out there and building a mission, building a product, building a legacy, it gets lonely. So it's easy to get back in your head and think about all the things that you're not doing.
Yeah, for me, it was when I first got out of school and I was an associate practicing in other people's offices. So I was not the owner. I was an associate, essentially another employee. Um, and I looked really young. I looked like I was when I first got out, I was like your age. I was like 28 or 29. I looked like I was like 18. And I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I just kind of compensated, I think, for my imposter syndrome by trying to get people to like me. And I think I went a little too far. Like, I just wanted everyone to like me. That was my thing. If I couldn't, win them over and educate them well enough or lead, I was like the fun, young, nice guy that everyone wanted to hang out with. And I really think that I struggled because of that.
Okay. Interesting. And, when I hear that, it's funny because we start putting ourselves in that bubble, right? Where we're like, this is untouchable or it's formidable and we're waiting for that bubble to be popped. And oftentimes it's really, again, it's self-induced, right? Like we start creating those own hurdles for ourselves to jump through or those hoops to jump through. And oftentimes they can vanish in an instant if we're willing to change the thought process around it. But it's also important to recognize that there's a little bit of fun and I would say flavor when you are that young, vivacious individual that is coming in with some raw experiences or raw skills that need some shaping and refinement. That's where you lean on your mentors and leaders to really step in to support you. And I think that's also a big conduit to how you're combating your imposter syndrome. What's your network? What is your surrounding? What's your environment allowing for? Are they also fueling that type of conversation or are they up to something?
That's a great point. I feel like I didn't have a great um support group. I kept in touch with some peers, but now this was 20 years ago. Now there's so many Facebook groups and so many easier ways to engage that I think I was kind of in my own little bubble there, and didn't reach out to good surrounding mentors and leaders. Um, I also think that, I was just coming out of school. There was people working in these offices that had been there for 15, 20 years. And they were looking at me like, who's this new young guy trying to tell me what to do? I think there was that whole mentality too.
Yeah, yeah, that comparison game is, I think the quote is comparison is the biggest thief of joy. And that's also the biggest challenge when we run into the imposter syndrome, right? Because we're fresh and we're new and we see where we're at today and we have a vision and a goal for where we want to be in the next year, a couple of months, whatever the timeline is. So then that becomes an extra frustration on top of it when you're seeing the people around you succeeding and growing or at the same pace that you're expecting yourself to be at in whatever timeline you've allotted. And it's funny because I was on a call with one of my coaches and I was going through the same conversation, right? Like imposter syndrome doesn't go away. It's about how you deal with it and what you do with that conversation and topic. And this is Sarah Cottingham that I was speaking with, and she was like, "Jonathan, it starts when you choose to start." So reminding myself that, like, I'm not 10 days behind, or I'm not a couple hours behind schedule. I'm right on time. And those little things and those little reminders are how I kind of wiggle my way out of the imposter syndrome bubble that I find myself in often.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the little therapy session there. I'll,
Yeah.
just send me the bill and I'll Venmo you. Tell me how to transition from like a contributor to that ownership mentality.
Yeah, so I would say this took place quite heavily throughout my corporate upbringing and moving into my work stream of dentistry. I've been in healthcare for almost 14 years, which is crazy because I'm 29 years old, but I've been surrounded within the pharmaceutical space since I was 16 working in hospitals. And that requires a lot of stretching. It requires you to get uncomfortable. It requires you to mature and grow up very quickly because you're now dealing with the life of another patient or another person. So, as I started stretching into my leadership levels and maturing and getting older, I started looking at it from the angle of, well, what really am I doing? Like, what impact am I actually leaving that I can be super proud of, that I'm excited to leave my name on, and how am I doing that? So it really started when I was in more of the project management space where I was leading these projects, but it wasn't just about getting a project to the finish line. It was about encouraging the entire team that was on the project team to bring it to fruition and have this product go live. That's where you start shifting the I'm not just doing something to get it done. It's the I now have to enroll the people around me to ensure that all of this is accomplished. So when you start going from like the doer to the contributor of the ideas, the ideation, the discussion, the facilitation, to now the owner, meaning I'm operating from extreme ownership, meaning I'm inspecting what I'm expecting. I'm going in and going under behind people. And that's often I would say misconstrued with micromanagement, because micromanagement is somebody looking over your shoulder consistently always, right? Going in and managing your expectations is a completely opposite side of the spectrum. So you have to be willing to go in and understand what's being done. And that's where I really stepped into more of the ownership mentality. If I'm going to give something to a team member to do, I'm capable of doing it myself. So if that means I gave it to you and I gave it to you with maybe 8 bullet points and there should have been 10 for you to be completely well rounded in it, that's on me. Let's jump on a call. Let's understand where the gaps are. Let me provide some opportunity for you, because that's a lesson learned for me. Everyone has a different learning style. So being willing to adapt to it and being agile with the type of conversations you're in also elevates the type of owner that you're willing to be. I mean, I want to be responsible for not just my client outcome, but how my team is doing inside of it. What are they doing in the process to ensure that that client receives the level of satisfaction that they might be looking for? So really, ownership, I look at it from an way of being. So how are you operating? What are you doing? What are you saying? Are your commitments falling short? Are you operating within your integrity? Are your values still intact? Or are you allowing them to go to the wayside and allowing too much flexibility to happen? And then there's no owners. And that doesn't help anyone.
And how important is it to work on the art of listening? I found that to be, and again, I struggle with being a leader every day, but when you stop talking and you do more listening, I feel like that's very powerful, especially when you have a big staff.
Yeah. There is a lot of power in just staying silent, and the power of the pause. I think it's one thing to remember that, there's a saying of don't just listen to respond, right? But there's also one thing to remember that not everything requires a response to begin with. It just needs to be acknowledged. It just needs to be heard. And it could be a simple gesture of body movement, like a nod. Okay, thank you so much. And we transition the conversation from where it started to where it needs to go. When I think about the true science behind active listening, it's really just staying in the present moment, right? We talk about wanting to have eye contact. We talk about wanting to have level of engagement. We have to have that or we can't have that if we're not willing to listen. So taking the moment to just sit and be with the person in no matter shape or form of the conversation, you get to just be with them. And there is power in that presence. There's power in that ability to stay with them. Because I'm guilty of this. I might be in a conversation with a team member or somebody else where I'm sitting with them, I heard them, I'm processing it, but then sometimes I don't know how to move the conversation from there because I'm still in that process state. And that's an opportunity though to re-engage. Like, hey, Dr. Block, I heard what you said. I'm still sitting with it. Run it back for me one more time. Like, I want
Mhm.
to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So that way I know how to best contribute to you. And if that's even what you're looking for, maybe I don't need to contribute anything. No feedback, nothing. I'm just here to listen and be your sounding board, be your venting space. And we all need those people in our life. Not everything is rainbows and butterflies all the time. However, we can choose how we create it within the creative space that we hold.
What about this? Someone comes into my office at about 4 PM, and they're talking to me about something, and I look at them, I'm nodding, I'm listening, and I tell them, "I hear you, but my brain is junk right now. Can we revisit this tomorrow?" Is that okay to say?
Yeah, I absolutely encourage that. And that's more, I think that's more warranted and more appreciative too, because it's like, hey, look, I hear you. I'm just not present for you at this moment. And that's part of the ask too. Like, if I'm looking to give feedback to somebody, it's not just going in like, hey, you guys did great on this, but this area sucked, da 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 da, right? No, it's like, hey, dude, are you open for feedback? Okay, great. Same thing as if you're going and approaching a conversation. Are you open to talk about whatever topic it is? Yep, I'd love to talk about that. Right now is not the best time, but let's talk about that in our morning huddle tomorrow. Let's carve out an extra 10 minutes for this discussion. Timing, prioritizing the discussion that you want to have, and allowing your people to feel heard and seen while acknowledging the timeline and whatever other interruptions that might be coming up.
Now, tell me about talent acquisition, and how to optimize that process, and all about talent by Zia.com.
Yeah. So Zia is our homage organization that we created essentially for all of our recruiting services that live under the umbrellas of talent acquisition and optimization. So I sold my organization last year. I decided to bring it back under my umbrella a few months ago, and it's been one of the best decisions that myself, my partner Michael, have decided to make for not only our clients but also our team. And it really emphasizes, I would say, the impact and mission that Michael and I are looking to operate from. Zia is homage to our late Rottweiler. So something about her was her little tail was always in motion. And that's what Zia means in Swahili, is in motion. So we, I would say, know how to pivot and pivot positively. So that became our tagline of how do we stay in motion with the businesses that we're supporting? It's looking at the talent that we're utilizing and the strategy in place to ensure that people are being utilized to their best capability and optimized for their future. So when we start going into the discussion, it's not just around like recruiting. Sure, there's recruiters out there, and I know a ton of them that are awesome in dentistry. And I love them because I find great partnerships with them because we're able to share our talent pools and share our resources. And look, if they win, that's a win on our community, not just a win on an individual. It's an opportunity for a person to begin making an impact for patients and a team. So we tackle that lens from both the integration and retention capacity, whether you're going for a virtual or on-site team member. We'll look at it from the lens of, okay, great. What do they need to be doing today? And then what do we want them to be growing into in their future? So creating that succession plan right on the forefront of it, our conversation, is key to our discussions because we don't want to just be a side partner of your talent resources or talent strategy. We want to be here as your talent partner to be your
Mhm.
solution to your long-term initiatives, aligning the talent strategy to the actual business goals. We can't get there if we don't have the people to to bring you there, right? And right now the talent shortage is huge. So it becomes a matter of, is it really a talent shortage or is it a shortage of tolerable workplaces? How are we creating the atmosphere for new talent coming in, whether they're new grads or coming from other industries? What's the opportunity that we're creating for them to step into? And we get to be part of that.
What is the state of talent out there these days? And do you hear a lot of dentists that just say there's just There's no one that wants to work out there, and they're really having a struggle trying to find staff?
Yeah, and that is the same remark. I can't find anybody. Nobody wants to work. And I'm like, well, let's look at what you're advertising. And the very first thing that I see, I don't like to refer to anybody as a rock star, family member. Like, I don't refer to that language because unfortunately it's a little antiquated. We can talk about it from the cultural feeling that we want to have enveloped, but no more from the state of a skill set or soft skills or hard skills. Like, it's going beyond that now. So, for instance, we got an email this morning. I had a hygienist lined up for a working interview next week, and she decided no, she's not going to come in. She's not coming in for the working interview because she doesn't feel like it. Okay, got it. So you're dealing with those types of conversations. And then you're also dealing with speed to the lead in some sense. If you're not getting to that candidate quick enough, that candidate has already spoke to another opportunity and potentially has another offer on the table. I just went to extend an offer to a treatment coordinator out in Arizona, extending an offer at 28 an hour. That's a little bit of the higher spectrum for that type of role. She got a countered offer for 46 an hour as a treatment coordinator working Monday through Thursday.
Mm,
How does a private practice compete with that level of scope and opportunity when this is a large it was an OMS 9 location practice group that she accepted from. And I look at that of like, well, dang, like, yeah, that's a really great opportunity. And then that brings me to the point like, okay, doctor, why do you think that you can still offer 20 to 24 an hour for somebody that you're saying to be a rock star when those were the wages that were more acceptable for a rock star in 2018, 2019? Now it's 2024. We have to deal with other societal factors that come into play. Inflation, the cost of living has increased, the cost of groceries has increased. So $20 an hour today is essentially like 15 to $17 an hour a few years ago. So it's not as substantial as it could be, along with the blending of roles. There has been a lot more movement in hybrid capacities, which is great, but that doesn't mean you get to rob them in terms of compensation. I was in a conversation where they're looking to morph two positions because they're looking to cut costs. That's great, but you have to be willing to understand what other impacts that's going to bring. Maybe there's a deficiency in the proficiency. Maybe there's a deficiency in the language. Maybe there's a deficiency in the consideration or their demeanor or their patient bedside manner, right? Like whatever other things come into play, it's that you have to be considerate of. And it is no more just, or excuse me, no longer just about posting ads. Like you have to be actively sourcing, headhunting, talking on these Facebook groups, talking on the different boards. Indeed and LinkedIn are great. Those are two platforms out of a pool of other ones that you could be sourcing from. So it's a lot.
and what are your thoughts on integrating virtual talent?
Well, I have positive thoughts on that for sure, because when we're dealing with rural locations, maybe Lawrence, South Carolina, that is hours away from a major city. It's very difficult to find tailored or even seasoned talent specifically with that area unless they're willing to travel maybe 30 to 45 minutes within that distance. Utilizing virtual talent helps bridge that gap. Even if you were just looking for them to take on more of the tactical things like insurance verification, scheduling, appointment confirmation, things like that, that aren't, I would say, necessarily could be patient facing unless you want them to be, that helps support the role. That helps fill the void immediately. And you get to be responsible for training and molding them to essentially be your patient concierge. And it's a quarter of the cost at times too. We're able to look at, a global talent pool now at this point, what's going on in these different countries, what's going on in these different other aspects of the world. There's so many talented people that we get to interact with that you don't get to optimize or utilize them if you don't know that they exist. So why not bring somebody on from Brazil that has been working remotely in a billing organization that is capable of doing anything and everything for your office? Awesome. They might have some training opportunities, of course, then let's refine them. Let's get them to good to great to even better than where they were when they started. But it's all inside of the motion of it. And when you're looking to bring on virtual talent, I would have to say that it's not to be done from the sense of cutting cost. Yes, there's going to be costs that are cut to your overhead automatically when you bring on virtual team members. But if you're only doing it from a cost factor, it's not going to be successful and it's not going to be scalable for your practice because you're not invested into the actual integration of the relationship. You're still looking at it from a tactical space. I just need them to do the insurance verification. Awesome. How are they working with your office manager or your treatment coordinator to ensure that the plans are correctly entered? So that way, when it's time to present, we're presenting the right amount versus a fictitious value that we think could be in there. So it's communication, it's teamwork, it's collaboration, it's willing to be curious and looking at what really is the right person to bring in. Because you might think you might just need one person to come in and do insurance verification, but hey, you're also paying for all of this digital marketing and you're missing all these phone calls. Why not get somebody on the call to make sure that those calls are getting converted into active paying patients? All inside of the strategy that really you want to stand for, and then we get to help create with you.
That's great. Now, also tell me about chiefpsycho.com.
Yes. So Chief Psycho was the brand and name that I've kind of tagged and coined for myself. And, I developed this in tandem with, I'm a huge Psycho Bunny fan. I like a lot of the colors and like the charisma and the loudness of it. I didn't want to incorporate any animals into the imagery, of course, but I decided to bridge both my corporate background, which was more of the C-suite chief level roles that I was in, and then bridging it with the psychology realm, which kind of created the chief psycho. So looking at it from how do I be the best people leader in any conversations that I'm in, and it's been fun. So I've created Chief Psycho more into like a brand, and I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing a lot of speaking, I'm doing a lot of educating on it, and I'm excited to create it more into a community style of organization. So that way, it's just continuous learning. That's my goal as a psychologist, as an educator, is I want to transition knowledge seekers to knowledge creators on their own. So if I can do that with a post or a podcast and a conversation and just sharing, a sliver of my insight, I feel like I've done some justice there. And I just want to continue doing more of it. And it's fun. I get to be Chief Psycho because I'm a little crazy.
Love it. All right, let's wrap up with two final questions. One is how do we find out more about what you're up to? And number two, what advice would you give to the young dental professionals out there?
Yeah, so you can definitely find me on all the social channels. My handles are at the Chief Psycho or at Talent by Zia. That is them across Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the places. You can check out our websites, talentbyzia.com or chiefpsycho.com. Um, as far as closing comments, words of wisdom, master the art of people, take the time to get to know your people, take the time to get to know yourself, because the more that you're investing into your own personal development, the better person that you are for the people that you're developing. Learning that firsthand, it creates wonders and it creates waves. And, you know, we know that coming out of our education system that there's going to be voids inside of how we lead and support personnel. Be a sponge, lean into more of those course and programs. There's a lot of great technology and tools and equipment that are coming out too, of course. There's also a lot of great ways to master the art of people, and starts with listening and starts with engaging.
Great stuff, man. Jonathan Bonanno, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.